Hi there and welcome to my third video of my Swift Basics series. So in this video, we're going to look at if statements. So by the end of the video, you're going to know what an if statement is, why we use them, and how you can implement them in the Swift programming language. So let's get started. So firstly, what is an if statement? Well, in programming, an if statement is a conditional statement. So what this means is if a certain condition is true, then it'll return a specific value or run some specified code. So essentially an if statement is a true or false statement. If this is true, then run this piece of code or do this. So for example, if you had a program that wanted to check the age of a customer, we can write a statement that reads, if age is greater than 18, say, or print, come on in, else print, you're too young. So the reason that you might want to be implementing if statements, and they are used a lot in programming, is if you want to run different code dependent on certain conditions. Like I said, you may have a program that shows the user different information dependent on their age, and the way that you would do that is by checking their age using an if statement. So let's go ahead and try and implement an if statement in Swift programming. So firstly, if you did follow along my first Swift Basics video on variables, then you'll have your blank playground here, and we're going to use that same playground in a second. If you don't have a blank playground and you're not sure where to get it from, you may find it underneath more playgrounds at the bottom. If it's not in this row, click on See All, and then underneath starting points you'll find blank, and then you can hit Git there. So once you have a blank playground, and particularly if you have the variables blank playground that we created or another one that's already there, rather than just create multiple blank playgrounds, we can actually use the same blank playground. But what we're going to do first is rename it. So we're going to right or secondary click. I'm going to hit rename playground, and I'm going to call it Swift Basics. And I'm going to go ahead and double click. So if you follow along my Swift Basics variable video, this is the code that we created. So what we're going to do is just create another page inside of this playground. So if we go ahead and hit the button next to the back button in the top left, what that does is bring up the sidebar, and you can see the first option we have here is called Pages. Go ahead and hit the little plus icon, and it will add a new page, and we're going to call this one If Statements. So you can already see that essentially this is going to make things far more organized. If you have multiple pieces of code that you're going to write and they're all kind of related, it makes more sense to keep them into one playground as opposed to just having multiple playgrounds. It just keeps things a little bit more organized. So go ahead and close the side window, and we can cycle between the pages we've created using the arrows next to the name of the page up the top. Okay, so let's go ahead and create ourselves an if statement. So we're going to use the example that we had earlier. So the first thing that we're going to do is actually pull from the variables video that we had before, and we're going to create ourselves a variable because it's going to make creating our if statement a little bit simpler. So if you remember, to create a variable, we start with var. I'm going to call my variable age because it's going to store an age, okay? And I'm going to store the age, or the number, or what we call in programming the integer, 20. Okay, so now we've got a variable that we can use in our program. We're going to go ahead and create our if statement, and we start our if statement quite straightforwardly with if. So I'm going to say if age is greater than 18, and then we use our curly braces, okay, or curly brackets if you prefer. And then inside of here is where we write our code. So we're going to hit print come on in. Okay, so let's just zoom in and have a look at this one just before we go and run our code. So we've created a variable called age, and it's storing the integer 20. So our if statement is saying if age is greater than. So I just want to talk about this in the center. So this is what we call an operator. Okay, so what this is doing is essentially the symbol for saying greater than or less than. So this is the way around that we want it to be if we're checking if age is greater than 18. If we wanted to check if it was less than, we would do it the other way around. So a simple way to remember which way around to keep it is the actual arrow itself. So you'll see at the moment that the small side is pointed towards age. So that means this is what we want to check is less than. The other way around, the larger side, the open side, is pointing towards age. So that's where we're saying is greater than. And then, like I said, we have our curly brackets or curly braces, and then we have print come on in. Okay, so let's just zoom back out, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit run my code in the bottom right. Okay, so you can see that we have printed out come on in. Okay, so it's working. So we've checked because we know age is 20, so we know it's greater than 18, so it should print this statement. So what happens if we change it to 15? Okay, so we're still not changing our if statement, we're checking if age is greater than 18. So let's go ahead and hit run my code again. So you can see now that there's no output, nothing has happened. And that's because this condition, so this is age greater than 18 is not true, so it won't complete the code that's inside. So what we can do with if statements as well is add an else. So essentially something that happens if this if condition is not true. So we're going to go ahead and hit else, and we're going to again have our curly braces, and we're going to say print you're too young. So what will happen here is we're now saying if age is greater than 18, print come on in, so hasn't changed, exactly the same as it was, else print you're too young. So what should happen is if the age is greater than 18, it will print come on in. If it's less than 18, which it is, it should print you're too young. So let's go ahead and test and see if that works. Okay, so something has been printed, and it's printed you're too young. Okay, so that is how you can use if statement in Swift programming. I hope that has been useful for you.